Today's presentation is going to be about our application developer. We call this our novice perspective, so that people can come into Rules Manager development environment and start developing rules with a what you see is what you get, a WYSIWYG type interface, so that you can just click around and create rules on the fly without actually having much experience with Rules Manager or configuration of Maximo in general. It's pretty much as you work, you're looking at everything from an application down perspective so that you can see everything as the user would see things, and you can say, I don't want to see this field, I don't want to see this field when this user, or I want to change the way this field functions, etc. So let's go ahead and start with how do we open the application developer perspective. So this is one of the new perspectives that we've added to the Rules Manager Studio. And to open one of the new perspectives, all you have to do is click on the Open Perspective icon up in the upper right-hand side. Or you can also go to the Windows Open Perspective and select from there the RM App Developer Perspective. This will open you up into the layout of our application developer. Right now, we're not connected to any running Maximo instance, and so what you see is pretty much a blank screen. I'm going to explain for you guys what each section of the app developer layout does. Let's see if I can actually use my highlighter here. Okay, so over here on the left-hand side, we have our main navigation view. Okay, that was a very sloppy highlighting. Yes, I know. The App Explorer will be our main explorer and our driving mechanism for this perspective. It will show us the applications for which we have developed rules, as well as give us a window into new applications so that we can develop rules for those applications. And let's go ahead and install that. So let's go ahead and get off of. And go ahead and let's connect to an instance. So when I connect to an instance, let's connect to my local host. I'll make a connection, and initially I'm showing nothing. Actually, all I'm right now is showing the prop mate application, and that's just because there are by default some data restriction out of the box Maximo configurations on that. This is an out of the box instance. So what I'm going to do is actually connect to and develop rules on my SR application. So what I do is I hit the icon up in the upper left on things that's configure app. And when I click this, this will open up a list of all the applications that are currently in your Maximo system. So these are all registered to your Maximo system. So if you have custom applications, they will appear on here. Right now, I'm going to select the service request application. And when I select this, what you'll notice is that it automatically opens up on the right-hand side a re-representation of the SR application. This is not Internet Explorer or another browser. This is Java, and it is our application editor. This will allow you to configure rules on everything that you can see and how you've developed your SR application. This is the same representation you would see in your application designer. So we're pulling this XML straight from your Maximo system and re-representing it in Eclipse. And as you notice, sections and controls will highlight as I hover over them. This is letting me know which controls I currently have selected and will write rules if I were to click on them. On the left-hand side, you'll notice now that I have the SR application, and underneath that, I've expanded an objects collection. This will be all the objects for which I have written rules. There are none right now, so there is nothing that will show up. As I start to develop rules in the App Explorer, you'll notice that I'll see the rules appear underneath my left-hand side Application Explorer, underneath the app that I'm writing the rules onto, as well as if there are object-specific rules, they will appear under the objects for which I've written them. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually create an onFirstSave rule. So to do this, I can just go and look at the button that I would click to save a record in my application. Everybody knows that to be the icon that looks like a save disk. And I select, let's go ahead and select New Record Rule. I'm going to do onFirstSave. This will give me the options of the types of rules I can create. And this is just an example of how to create a specific record rule. So when I create this, what you'll notice on the left-hand side is underneath my SR, I have an onFirstSave rule. Now, what we're showing you underneath the SR app directly are any rules that apply directly to the main object of this application, such as the SR object for the SR application. If I double-click on this rule, we will open up our rule editor. And for a lot of you more mature rule developers, this is a common sight for you. This is the same editor that you use to develop conditional rules or to create the actual logic for your on-first save rule. So let's go ahead and create a JavaScript rule. And let's say that the first time when I come in here, I want to say if my SR dot reported by ID is null, let's go ahead and automatically populate it with the currently logged in user. And as you notice, as I'm typing, for those of you who are not accustomed to RulesManager rule writing, I am actually getting completion, content assist, so that it will help me understand what variables I have access to in my JavaScript syntax, so that I'm not just blindly knowing what variables I have when I get into this rule and start writing. I will actually present these to you live time for your server and how they and the data that is pertinent to the records that you're writing. So obviously on an on-first save rule, we want the access to the SR record that we are saving, the first time we're saving an SR record. From that, when I hit dot or control space, I can get all the fields and all the relationships on top of that SR. And this is the fields and relationships you've defined inside of your system. Right now I'm working in an out-of-the-box system, but for yours, you could have a lot of custom fields defined for your service request object. And then once I did that, I also have access to a Maximo object, which gives me access to all the data in Maximo, as well as the currently logged in user. And that's why I got the username from my Maximo object. So this very simple rule basically just populates my reported by ID based on the fact that it was not filled in when they first saved this record. So let's go ahead and test out this rule. First, we'll need to commit it. So to commit this, for those seasoned RulesManager developers, it's the same icon. You commit back to the server. And then you commit the file back to the server, and this is the XML that we just created, and you can hit refresh, and this tells the server that it has new rules and should reread these. To test this, it's very simple, because we just open with an internet browser, and we go and we navigate you right to the application that you're working on or that you selected. So let's go ahead and create a new record. And right now, I'm not going to put in my reported by, but let's go ahead and save this. And you'll notice that I automatically populated the reported by with the user that I've got logged in. So when I right-clicked and said, let's open my SR, it opened up my SR application in the internet browser and logged me in with the username that I used to log in and connect to Maximo in my App Explorer. So that's my first rule. It's developed and it's tested. Let's go develop a couple more rules. Next, let's go ahead and say I want to hide my specifications tab. All right, so let's go back to my app developer, right-click on my tab, and on here you can see that I can hide this tab specifically. So let's just hide this tab. So now you'll see on the left-hand side, I'll have a new control section, and this will give me a list of all the tabs and the types that they are, or all the controls and all the types that that control is, and what events I've written on them. So now I have a hidden event on specification tab. If I double-click this, I can actually make this conditional hidden, and which is what I want to do. And what we're going to have this hide on is when my class structure ID or classification is null. Let's go ahead, commit that, hit refresh, and I'm going to test this again. I'm not going to test every single rule I write for you. I'm going to start developing rules relatively quickly to show you how these work. But as you can see, this is how development will work with the new RulesManager application developer perspective. You notice that when I start out, my specification tab is hidden. And if I were to go ahead and classify this, you'll notice my specifications tab now appears. That's how easy it was to hide a specifications tab. So that tested out fine. Now let's say, if I really wanted to, I could also say, let's go ahead and make this specific to a group of users or a user in specific. Let's go ahead and make it specific to a group of users. So what I'm going to do is right-click and bring up the Properties view. The Properties view appears in the bottom left-hand corner, as you can see, and this will give you all the ability to modify specific details about when this rule will fire. So right now we have it defaulted to fire for app, SR, app family, SR, all groups, all orgs, all sites, and all users. Well, I can change this to say, let's only fire for these selected groups of users. And this is how you would do the same thing you could do with SIG options, except that it's a lot easier to manage and a lot easier to find and select your values. I'm just going to do this for max admin. If I want to do many, I could do many. But let's just do max admin. You notice it populates it down there. I just have to commit and refresh, and it will only now hide this tab. This specific rule will only fire for that group of users. You notice on the right over here on my SR app, my SR editor, I have a red button, which signifies that I have a rule on top here. If I right-click, you can see that I can now edit this rule, or disable this rule, or delete it, or add other rules. So right now, I'm going to actually go ahead and add a couple other rules to this screen, and I'm going to test them at the end here. So going along with the classification concept, let's go ahead and select my section underneath classification. What I'm going to do is say, when this is classified, when this record has been classified, let's go ahead and make all the contained fields inside of this section required. You notice now that I have a red outline. This signifies that I have a control rule on this section. And I'm going to edit it. And using my completion, I'll get my SR record, get my class structure ID field, and I'm going to say with that this should be required when somebody has specified a class structure ID. And let's go ahead and also require my priority. My priority will always be required. So let's go ahead and right-click on my internal priority, say New Field Rule, and as you can see, I get a list of all the field rules that I can possibly do to this specific field. I'm going to say, let's just make this always required. You notice that now I have a green field. What's going on here is I've created a field rule, and this will apply to all internal priorities in this application. So every time I come across an internal priority, doesn't matter what tab this appears on, the user will see this as a required field. And I'm going to leave it as always required, so I'm not even going to add a condition to this. On the left-hand side, in the App Explorer, you'll notice that I have my field appears underneath my fields and SR object, and you'll see that there's a required event underneath here. The reason why we display your Explorer like this is because if you can have multiple required events firing on internal priority, and sometimes you don't want to have overlapping events, such as making a field required, but also making it read-only, so that a user has a required field, but they can't fill it in, therefore they couldn't save the record. So this will give you an idea of how easy it is for you to see when rules could be overlapping and how they're firing and things like that. Let's also go in and make my service field. Let's make this read-only. So go over here, select read-only. So my service field will appear underneath my commodity, which is actually what it looks like in the database. It's commodity is service. Just because the label is different. You'll notice this is how easy it is for you to figure out that the label does not actually match the field in the database. And so you can just hover over it, and you can see that sr.commodity and the service is attached to the service label. Let's make this required and say that this is going to, read-only. And let's make this read-only when my commodity group, which would be my service group, is null. Again, I get another green dot on that field signifying that I have an event on that rule. Now, I'm going to also add some other little section rules. So I have my dates and my global issues. I'm actually going to say, you know what, I want these to start out as collapsed, because when this is a new record, there's no reason to show to actually have these expanded. I'm not hiding them, but I'm making it so that I take back some real estate from the user so it's less confusing. And I'm going to collapse both the global issues and the dates. And when I click on this, my new control property rule, I get a list of properties that I can do for this control. And what this event does, this control of property does, is on render of the specific type of control, I can modify any of these properties that I have here that I've displayed to you, and these will change depending on the type of control that you've selected. I can modify any of these properties and set them conditionally to any type of value. This becomes useful if you were, say, want to hide a download link on a table. You can conditionally hide a download link on a table or a value list. You can also change the displayed rows per page on a table if you wanted to. You can change all kinds of different properties of Maximo, and you'll get a list here such as label and display, style, etc. So this is clicking into Maximo's internal logic. We're just making it a lot easier for you to use. So my property is going to be collapsed, and I'm going to say, let's make this true. And I'm going to edit this and say, let's make this only when my MBO is new. I'll do the same thing with the other. So let's go ahead and commit this and test it out. Because we're pushing our time, we'll go ahead and see how the other thing's working. And as you notice, the dates actually does collapse here. So for the purposes of time saving, I'm actually not going to do any more of the other rule. You'll see that the other one could show. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of the other list page features that we have, such as let's go ahead and make on our list page, let's make status configure the filter so that it has a default value. And this is so that when I go into my list page, you'll notice from here, if I go to my list page, I get all my records in SR if I hit search. And that's because I don't have a default status. To add a default status is relatively easy, as you just saw. I can just right-click on the filter that I have and go ahead and add a status. So you notice that I'm getting a bunch of statuses over here on the right. So let's go back and notice that I've gone ahead and said, go ahead, create a default filter. And I'm going to edit it too. So I have a default filter for my status. I'm going to say, let's only show you the queued statuses. And when I go back into here, let's go back into my SR, reload the whole application. I'm going to take it a minute because your system is running a little slow. And you'll notice now that I'll have it automatically defaulted, albeit the user can actually change this if they want, because it's editable. I have a default status. That way, when I hit enter, I won't get all the SRs in the system, which could theoretically crash the system. I only get the queued ones. So this is very good for large applications, such as work order, or forward track, or other PR, depending on your system, which systems have a lot of records in them. You don't want to select start over. And lastly, I'm going to add another event for my table. And I can right-click on a table, any table, and do different things, such as hide the table, or I can style the rows of the table. If I wanted to style the columns, I could also do that. So when I add that, you'll notice that on my left-hand side, I have a style underneath my results show list table. If I double-click that, it gives me the style editor. So what I'm going to do is actually say, I'm also going to make this conditional for this table, saying that this will only highlight the rows where the SR internal priority equals 1. And I'll go back in, reload my service request set. The purpose of these styling of a row is to create such things as a KPI or other things. And this is technology that RulesManager currently has. The difference is that we've actually made it a lot easier for users and developers to add these types of KPIs so that you can stand out to the user when they come into their application. They can see the high priority queued SR tickets when they're list page. And that's how easy it was for me to add a KPI for a system. And lastly, what I'm going to add, the last thing I'm going to add is a value list. So if I wanted to add a value list to this application, I could do that. could right-click and say MX action. And come in here and say, let's do a custom action, call it validate. Go over to make it only appear on the main tab. And on this one, I'm just going to say if my SR dot target start null, and let's go ahead and show a message to my user, and we'll say show an error dialog saying please enter a valid target start date. And now we can open this up to any questions.